I'm just so happy being with you here, Philippe, because all the way back in 2007, you were here in Sweden, you were introducing your then new book, Immigrants, Your Country Needs Them. And that was so tremendously useful for the discussion in Sweden about immigration versus xenophobia. I was lobbying for a more liberal politics on immigration. And I'm just so proud that now here at Forus we are having an updated version of your book in Swedish with facts about Sweden. And you've been in Sweden many times, you know Sweden quite well. So if you look at the discussion about immigration in Sweden compared to other countries, how do you see it?
Well, I'm delighted too, obviously, that Immigrants is being published in Swedish. I mean, when it was originally published in English, it got a very favourable reception here. I've come to speak many times audiences. But I think, as you say, this new updated version in Swedish will hopefully reach a wider audience at a very important time in the debate here, because with the rise of the Sweden Democrats, there is a danger that the debate here is going to take a nasty turn, as it has in other countries like Britain or France or the Netherlands. And so it's important that there be a debate based on facts, and that we take a more positive approach. So I think this is a really crucial year here for the immigration debate in Sweden.
And you followed the Swedish debate for quite a long time, and if you look back, the first time you were here back in 2007, then 6 years on, how do you see things changing?
Well, when I first came to Sweden, the big thing I noticed is that because of the long and proud humanitarian tradition of welcoming refugees, that Swedes tended to see migrants as charity cases, not as people who had something to contribute to society, but simply people who were, unfortunate and who we, as Swedes, out of our kindness, were helping. And I said, well, yes, it's fine to be kind, but also these people have something to contribute, and that's the wrong way to look at it. It's the wrong way to look at it because, in a way, it undermines their potential to contribute, but also because it opens the door to precisely the kind of arguments you get from the Sweden Democrats, which is, well, we can't afford to provide charity to the whole of the world, we need to look after ourselves first. So I think it's much more important to turn that debate around and say, actually, yes, it is good that people are able to come to Sweden, it improves their life a lot, but it's also good for Sweden. They contribute to society, they contribute to the economy, they contribute to culture. And I think this government has made a big step, and I think the debate has moved more in that direction with the reforms 5 years ago to make it easier to come work here. So that's been a very positive aspect. The more negative aspect, as we mentioned, is the rise of the Sweden Democrats and the potential for the debate to turn nasty.
5 years ago, as you mentioned, Sweden opened for third country labor migration to Sweden, and now the major labor organizations are starting to say that they want to have sort of a veto where they can decide whether or not there's need for third country immigrants as workforce. How do you see that?
Well, I think that while I'm full of praise for Sweden's immigration reforms, allowing businesses to employ the people that they need of all skill levels from around the world on flexible visas when they can't find the suitable people nearby, but at the same time Sweden doesn't do a very good job of making best use of the people who are already here. So if you look that even though Sweden's economy is actually the most successful advanced economy in Europe since the crisis, unemployment is still 8%, and you see that unemployment among migrants is particularly high, and unemployment among young people is particularly high. It's 24% youth unemployment. And that tells you that there's something that's going wrong in Sweden's labour market. And I think that it privileges basically insiders at the expense of outsiders. And I think in the interest of everyone in society, not just migrants in particular, you need to have a reform to ensure that everyone can participate in the labour market. And I think that's vital for young people in Sweden, it's vital for migrants in Sweden, and it's vital for the future prosperity of the economy as a whole.
And I don't know if you want to go into the details, but I'm still excited about hearing your view on this perspective that the labor unions would be able to dictate whether or not there is a need for immigrant workforce.
Well, I think that it's not helpful to impose new immigration. If the government has made it easier to bring in people who are needed in the economy, I don't think it's helpful to give other people a veto over that.
I guess part of the reason they're doing this is that several of the major parties, particularly the Social Democrats and maybe the conservative Moderaterna, are seeing that a lot of their voters are actually going to Sverigedemokraterna and trying to deal with that. And I guess as a think tank, it would be relevant for us to tell them how to best deal with that without going down this xenophobic alley themselves.
Well,
what is your advice?
I think the first thing to say is that unions ought to see migrants in a positive light, in the sense that they're potential new members, just as any member in the workforce. So you don't need to see them as a threat to your union. You can see them as actually potential new members of your union. Second of all, I think what's dangerous about the Sweden Democrats and parties like that is that they appeal to both traditional left-wing voters and traditional right-wing voters. The social conservative aspects is appealing to some right-wing voters, and the kind of pro-welfare protectionist views are appealing to some people on the left, and that's the danger. So I think it's important, first of all, that people on the left who have a tradition of international solidarity don't fall victim to the appeal of the Sweden Democrats. At the same time, it's important to tackle the underlying problems which we've discussed, not least high unemployment among certain groups of people. The most important thing to say is that, and that here experience shows it very clearly in other countries, if you try and echo the lines of the Sweden Democrats in the hope that their voters are going to vote for you, what you end up doing is, first, you legitimize their views, and second of all, people say, well, why should we vote for these copycats? We might as well vote for the real thing. So you don't even get that gain in support. What you get, the danger is you get a race to the bottom, where each is competing for these votes, and very soon everyone is more or less anti-immigration, and politics turns very nasty. And Sweden is still at a point where it can avoid that race to the bottom, and I hope that this book can be a part of helping it avoiding that race to the bottom.
And this is really a part of a defensive strategy, how to avoid that. How, with the elections coming up, how do we move towards being more offensive, more getting a discussion about how it can be a more open society and open the doors more widely, if you will?
Sure. Well, I think first of all you need to be very positive about the decisions that have already been made. I think the Social Democrats were right to open the labour market in 2004 to people from the new member states, and the Alliance government has been right with its labour market reforms in 2008. So first of all, be proud and be positive about your record. At the same time, I think we need to celebrate the economic benefits of diversity. That one of modern Sweden's biggest benefits is precisely the fact that it has such a diverse society, and you can see that in two ways. As part of the research for one of my books, I interviewed a guy called Darius Stenberg, who runs a company that exports, a small company that exports dental alloys for fillings in teeth, and he exports to China. And his operations in China are run by a Chinese manager who lived in Sweden for 11 years. And so he speaks both Mandarin and Swedish. He understands both the culture and the business mentality of both countries, and he is thanks to his migration to Sweden, Sweden is able to export much more to China. That's one example. The second example is in terms of innovation. If you think in an advanced economy like Sweden, most economic growth comes from new ideas and new businesses. And having people around with different perspectives helps spark new ideas. And you can see that a very clear example here in Sweden. Perhaps the most successful internet startup in Europe, Skype, was co-founded by Swedes working together with Danes, working together with Estonians. Looking further afield to Silicon Valley, you see Google, Yahoo, eBay, PayPal, YouTube, many others co-founded by migrants working together with local people. So this is not an argument about saying, somehow migrants are good, local people are bad. It's saying people who are different working together actually are more productive, more creative, and help generate new ideas and businesses and growth for everybody.
Thank you so much, Philippe, and you're due on stage in a minute now. I've got one last request. If you could please sign my book. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.